Welcome to Abba Memorabile, from Time Beyond Memory. I'm Drake.
And I'm Holly, where ancient wisdom meets modern minds.
Brought to you by the most ancient anamnetic order of Trikala, for seekers everywhere. Whether you're walking with us, or simply curious about the path,
Each episode, we explore the hidden patterns that connect philosophy, consciousness, and human transformation.
drawing from traditions east and west, old and new, familiar and forgotten.
Because some truths exist outside of time, waiting to be remembered, not learned.
On this episode, we're diving into one of the most enchanting and unsettling questions in all of philosophy. A question posed by a Chinese sage over 2,000 years ago that still sends ripples through consciousness studies, quantum physics, and our understanding of reality itself.
Drake, you're talking about Zhuangzi's butterfly dream, aren't you? I have to admit, the first time I heard this story, it seemed almost whimsical, like a philosophical fairy tale. But the more I sit with it,
The more it dissolves everything you thought you knew about reality.
exactly, for those who haven't encountered it, would you share the story?
Of course, it's deceptively simple. Zhuangzi, or Zhuangzi as it's pronounced, tells us, once upon a time, I, Zhuangzi, dreamed I was a butterfly, fluttering happily here and there, enjoying life without knowing I was Zhuangzi. Suddenly I woke up and there I was, unmistakably Zhuangzi. But I didn't know if I was Zhuangzi who had dreamt of being a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming I was Zhuangzi.
And that's it, that's the entire parable. Maybe 50 words that have haunted philosophy for over 2 millennia.
Because once you really let that question in, am I the dreamer or the dreamed? Something fundamental shifts in how you experience reality. It's not just a thought experiment. It's what the order might call a consciousness technology, a tool for transformation.
What strikes me is how different this is from how Western philosophy typically approaches the question of reality. When Descartes famously doubted everything, he was trying to find solid ground, something indubitable to build on.
Cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. He used radical doubt to arrive at certainty.
But Zhuangzi seems to be doing something else entirely. He's not trying to resolve the uncertainty. He's inviting us to live in it, to dance with it.
Yes. And this points to something fundamental in Daoist philosophy, the concept of hua, which means transformation or change. For Zhuangzi, reality isn't about fixed states or permanent identities. It's about constant transformation, endless becoming.
So the question isn't really, which one am I really, the man or the butterfly? The question is, why do I think there's a really at all?
Precisely. In the Zhuangzi text, this story appears in a chapter called On the Equality of Things, Qi Wu Lun, Qi Wu Lun. The whole chapter is about dissolving the boundaries we create between this and that, self and other, real and unreal.
Let's dive deeper into what this parable is actually pointing toward. Because on the surface, someone might say, well, obviously Zhuangzi was the man who dreamed of being a butterfly. When he woke up, he returned to reality.
But that assumes waking consciousness is more real than dream consciousness. Why? Simply because it seems more stable, more shared, more consistent?
Well, those are fairly compelling reasons, aren't they?
Are they, though? Think about your own experience. When you're inside a dream, fully immersed, doesn't it feel completely real? You experience emotions, sensations, narratives. Your dream self doesn't usually know it's dreaming.
That's true. I've had dreams where I've lived what felt like days or even years, complete with memories and relationships that seemed absolutely real until I woke up.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Modern neuroscience shows us that the brain activity during REM sleep, when we dream most vividly, is remarkably similar to waking consciousness. The same areas light up. We're constructing reality in both states.
So, from the brain's perspective, both experiences are equally real in terms of neural activity.
Which brings us to an uncomfortable question. If our waking life is also a construction of consciousness, just like our dreams, what makes it more real? Convention? Consensus? The fact that we all seem to share this particular dream?
You're edging towards simulation theory here, aren't you?
Well, it's fascinating how Zhuangzi's ancient parable anticipates modern questions about the nature of reality, whether it's simulation theory, the many worlds interpretation of a quantum mechanics, or virtual reality, we keep coming back to this same fundamental question. How do we know what's real?
But I think Zhuangzi is pointing to something even more radical than simulation theory. It's not just that we might be in a simulation, it's that the very categories of real and simulated, dreamer and dreamed, might be constructions of consciousness that don't ultimately hold.
Let's look at how this connects to other Eastern philosophical traditions. In Buddhism, particularly in the Yogacara school, there's this idea that everything we experience is vijñapti matra, consciousness only. What we call external reality is actually a projection of mind.
And in Hindu philosophy, especially Advaita Vedanta, there's the concept of Maya, often translated as illusion, but really meaning the creative power that makes the one appear as many.
Yes, and they use the dream analogy extensively. In the Mandukya Upanishad, they describe three states of consciousness: waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, plus a fourth state, turiya, which transcends and includes all three.
So, from that perspective, our normal waking consciousness is just one state among others, no more or less real than dreaming.
Exactly. And various traditions have developed practices to explore this. Dream yoga in Tibetan Buddhism, for instance, isn't just about lucid dreaming. It's about recognizing the dreamlike nature of all experience.
I've practiced lucid dreaming, and there's something profound about that moment when you realize you're dreaming while still in the dream. Suddenly you have agency, choice, freedom you didn't know was possible.
And the Tibetan masters would say, now apply that same recognition to your waking life. What if you could become lucid in the dream of daily existence?
That's both liberating and destabilizing. If I'm dreaming right now, who's the dreamer?
And we're back to Zhuangzi's question. But notice, he doesn't answer it. He leaves us in that space of not knowing, what the Zen tradition would later call don't know mind.
Drake, I want to explore the practical implications of this because someone listening might think, okay, interesting philosophy, but if everything is a dream, why does anything matter? Why not just check out?
That's such an important point. And it's where Zhuangzi is often misunderstood. He's not saying nothing matters. He's saying everything matters differently than we think it does.
How so?
Well, think about how you engage with a lucid dream. You don't become passive. Actually, you become more creative, more playful, more engaged because you're not trapped by the dream's apparent limitations.
You're participating in the creation of reality rather than being victimized by it.
Exactly. Zhuangzi talks about this using the concept of wu wei, effortless action. When you recognize the fluid, transformational nature of reality, you stop trying to force things into fixed patterns. You learn to flow with the transformation.
It reminds me of something from the Order's teachings, that resistance comes from believing in solid, separate selfhood. When you recognize the fluid nature of identity, resistance dissolves.
Yes, and this connects to another key concept in the Zhuangzi, ziran, dizran, meaning naturalness or spontaneity. The butterfly doesn't worry about being a butterfly. It just butterflies. The problem arises when Zhuangzi wakes up and starts thinking about identity, creating a problem that didn't exist for the butterfly.
So, in a way, the butterfly is wiser than Zhuangzi because it's not caught up in questions of identity.
Or perhaps the butterfly is Zhuangzi in his wisdom state, free, spontaneous, without the burden of self-consciousness.
Let's talk about how this parable has influenced other thinkers. You mentioned Descartes earlier, and his dream argument is fascinating to compare with Zhuangzi's.
Yes, Descartes also recognized that we can't distinguish dreams from reality based on experience alone, but his response was to doubt everything until he found something undoubtable. Zhuangzi's response is more like, why do we need to distinguish them at all?
It's the difference between Western philosophy's quest for certainty and Eastern philosophy's comfort with paradox.
Though, interestingly, some Western philosophers have moved closer to Zhuangzi's position. Nietzsche, for instance, wrote about the need to become who you are, suggesting identity is something we create, not something we discover.
And contemporary philosophers of mind are grappling with similar questions. Thomas Nagel's famous essay, What is it like to be a bat?, touches on this same territory, the impossibility of truly knowing another form of consciousness.
Right? And if we can't know what it's like to be a bat, how can we know what it's like to be ourselves? Maybe Zhuangzi dreaming of being a butterfly is experiencing something just as valid as his human consciousness.
This connects to modern consciousness studies too. The hard problem of consciousness, why there's something it's like to be conscious, becomes even more complex when we consider that there might be multiple, equally valid ways of being conscious.
And then there's the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, where every possible outcome actually occurs in parallel universes. In one world, Zhuangzi is a man who dreamed of being a butterfly. In another, he's a butterfly dreaming of being a man. Both equally real.
My head is spinning, Drake, but in a good way, like the kind of vertigo that comes from seeing a wider vista than you knew existed.
You know, Holly, there's another layer to this story that I find particularly profound. Zhuangzi chose a butterfly for his parable. Not a bird, not another human, but a butterfly.
That's true. Why a butterfly specifically?
Well, think about what a butterfly represents. Complete metamorphosis. It literally dissolves into undifferentiated goo in the chrysalis before reconstituting as an entirely different being.
Oh, so the butterfly already embodies transformation, hua. It's the perfect symbol for the fluid nature of identity.
And consider this: a caterpillar has no conception of flying. Its entire reality is crawling, eating leaves, experiencing the world from ground level. Then it becomes something that experiences reality in a completely different way. Which experience is more real, the caterpillars or the butterflies?
Neither and both. They're different modes of being the same creature. Or are they the same creature at all?
Exactly the kind of question Zhuangzi wants us to sit with. And modern science makes it even more mysterious. We know now that the caterpillar essentially dies in the chrysalis. It liquefies. Yet somehow, certain memories persist. Butterflies can remember things from their caterpillar stage.
Wait, really?
Really. There have been studies where caterpillars were trained to avoid certain stimuli, and after metamorphosis, the butterflies retained that aversion. So something persists through complete transformation. But what? And how?
It's like consciousness itself is more fundamental than the form it takes.
Which brings us to something central in Daoist philosophy: the idea that consciousness or awareness is the fundamental nature of reality, and all forms are temporary expressions of it.
Drake, I want to bring this back to lived experience. How does contemplating Zhuangzi's butterfly dream actually change how we live?
For me, it's about holding identity more lightly. When I'm stressed or stuck, I remember that the I who is stressed is no more solid or permanent than Zhuangzi's butterfly. It's a temporary configuration of consciousness.
That's liberating, but couldn't it also be dissociating? Like, nothing's real, so why engage?
That's where the wisdom of the tradition comes in. Zhuangzi isn't saying to check out. He's saying to check in more fully, but without the desperate grasping that comes from believing in fixed identity. You can play your role fully while knowing it's a role.
Like an actor who's completely committed to their character while never forgetting their acting.
Perfect analogy. And that awareness that you're both the actor and the character gives you flexibility, creativity, compassion. You're less likely to get trapped in rigid patterns because you remember that patterns can transform.
The order teaches something similar, doesn't it? That resistance and suffering come from over-identification with temporary states.
Yes, and practices that help us disidentify. Not to become disconnected, but to become more fluid, more responsive, like water, which Taoists love as a metaphor. Water takes the shape of its container without losing its essential nature.
So maybe the question isn't, am I the man or the butterfly? But what is this awareness that can be both?
Now you're thinking like Zhuangzi. He has another famous passage where he talks about the transformation of things. He says a master craftsman wouldn't reject a piece of metal because it insisted on becoming only a specific tool. Reality is the master craftsman, and we're the metal being shaped into countless forms.
But we insist on being just one thing. I'm this kind of person, with these traits, these limitations.
And that insistence creates suffering. Because reality keeps trying to transform us, and we keep resisting, saying, "No, I'm Zhuangzi, not a butterfly."
There's something else I find fascinating about this parable. It's so short, so simple, yet it's generated thousands of years of commentary, interpretation, and contemplation.
That's the mark of profound wisdom, isn't it? Like a Zen koan, it's not meant to be solved, but to be lived with, to work on you as much as you work on it.
And different people at different times find different meanings in it. A neuroscientist might see questions about consciousness. A physicist might see parallel realities. A psychologist might say ego dissolution.
A mystic might see the play of the divine. An artist might see creative inspiration. The parable is like a mirror. It reflects back what we bring to it.
Which is itself very Daoist. The Tao Te Ching says the Tao is like an empty vessel, infinitely useful because it can contain anything.
And maybe that's what Zhuangzi's consciousness was in the moment between sleeping and waking. Empty, receptive, not yet crystallized into a fixed identity. In that space, he could feel the equal reality of both states.
It reminds me of that liminal moment when you first wake up, before you remember who you are, where you are, what your life is about. There's just awareness without content.
The Tibetans consider that moment extremely precious, a glimpse of the clear light of consciousness before it gets obscured by the habitual patterns of identity.
So every morning, we have a mini version of Zhuangzi's experience. We transition from one reality to another, and for just a moment, we might wonder which is real.
And usually we quickly dismiss the question, eager to get back to the solid ground of our known identity. But what if we lingered in that uncertainty a bit longer?
Drake, there's another dimension to explore here, the collective implications. If individual identity is fluid and dreamlike, what about collective reality? Are we all sharing the same dream?
That's a profound question. In some Buddhist texts, they talk about collective karma, how groups of beings with similar karma experience similar realities. Like we're all tuned to the same frequency, dreaming compatible dreams.
So consensus reality is just a shared dream we've all agreed to participate in?
In a way, yes. And you can see how different cultures, different times, dream different collective realities. What seemed absolutely real and solid to medieval Europeans, witches, humors, the divine right of kings, seems dreamlike to us now.
And presumably, our reality will seem equally dreamlike to future generations.
Which raises the question, if collective reality is also transforming, also hua, then what are we transforming into? What's the next dream humanity will dream together?
Maybe that's what we explored in our last episode about the second axial age, humanity becoming lucid in its collective dream.
Yes. Imagine if we could collectively recognize the dreamlike nature of our shared reality. Not to dismiss it, but to become conscious participants in its creation.
That would change everything. Politics, economics, how we relate to the environment, all of it would shift if we recognize it as a collective creation rather than fixed reality.
And maybe that recognition starts with individuals like Zhuangzi, having these moments of uncertainty about identity and sharing them with others.
Each person who questions the solidity of reality creates a small crack in the collective certainty.
Until eventually, like the Berlin Wall, the whole structure of assumed reality might suddenly crumble, revealing new possibilities.
You know, Drake, we've been talking about this philosophically, but there's also a very practical, somatic dimension. When I really contemplate Zhuangzi's question, not just intellectually, but in my body, something shifts.
What do you notice?
It's like a loosening. The tight grip of identity relaxes. My shoulders drop. My breathing deepens. There's more space somehow.
Yes. The body knows the truth of transformation even when the mind insists on fixity. Every cell in your body is constantly changing. The atoms that compose you are mostly empty space. At the physical level, you're more process than thing.
And isn't it interesting that in Chinese, the word for body, shen, shun, also means life or lifetime. Not a thing, but a duration, a process.
Beautiful. So even linguistically, Chinese thought recognizes the body as transformation rather than object.
This connects to somatic practices in Taoism too. Qigong, Taiji, they're all about cultivating flow, recognizing and working with the body as energy in motion rather than solid matter.
And when you practice these arts, you directly experience what Zhuangzi is pointing to. You feel yourself as pattern and flow rather than fixed form.
The order incorporates this understanding too. That transformation must be embodied, not just understood intellectually.
Right. You can't think your way into butterfly consciousness. You have to experience the dissolution and reformation, even if just for moments. Holly, as we near the end of our exploration, I keep thinking about the courage required to really take in Zhuangzi's question. It's not comfortable to question the reality of your own identity,
No, it's terrifying, actually. The ego experiences it as a kind of death threat.
which is perhaps why Zhuangzi presents it so gently, so playfully. A butterfly dream. How threatening can that be? Yet it smuggles in this radical questioning of everything we assume to be real.
It's like philosophical Aikido, using the minimum force necessary to completely redirect our understanding.
And notice that Zhuangzi doesn't conclude with despair or nihilism. The Zhuangzi text is full of joy, humor, celebration of life's transformations. Uncertainty doesn't lead to paralysis, but to dance.
Because if you're not fixed, you're free. If identity is fluid, you can become anything.
Or recognize that you already are everything, just experiencing itself as something specific temporarily.
That's a very mystical statement, Drake.
Well, mystics across traditions have pointed to this same insight. Meister Eckhart said, "The eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me. Consciousness, looking at itself, dreaming itself into countless forms."
And Rumi wrote, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop."
The butterfly contains Zhuangzi. Zhuangzi contains the butterfly. Both contain something vaster that dreams them both.
So, where does this leave us? If someone listening has really taken in this conversation, really let Zhuangzi's question work on them, what now?
I think the invitation is to hold identity more lightly, to notice when you're insisting on being just one thing, to remember that you're always in process, always transforming.
And maybe to pay more attention to dreams, not just sleeping dreams, but daydreams, imagination, the creative possibilities that arise when we loosen our grip on consensus reality.
Yes, and to recognize that every state of consciousness, waking, dreaming, imagining, meditating, offers its own valid perspective on what we are.
To become, as the order might say, philosophically multilingual, able to speak from different states of consciousness without privileging one as the real one.
And perhaps most importantly, to bring more playfulness to existence. If reality is more dreamlike than we thought, why not dance with it rather than trying to pin it down?
The butterfly certainly seems to be enjoying itself in Zhuangzi's dream.
And maybe that's the deepest teaching. Not which is real, the man or the butterfly, but which is more alive, which is more free, which is more aligned with the creative transformation that is existence itself,
Perhaps we should all spend more time in our butterfly mind.
or recognize that we already do. We just dream we're humans who've forgotten how to fly.
Drake, there's one more thing. Zhuangzi ends his parable with a term that often doesn't get translated. He says there must be a distinction between Zhuangzi and the butterfly. This is called the transformation of things, or wuhua, wuhua.
Yes, and that's so important. He's not saying there's no distinction between states, no differentiation. He's saying the distinction itself is part of the transformation.
So difference and unity, separation and connection, they're all movements in the dance of transformation.
The butterfly and Zhuangzi are different notes in the same melody, different gestures in the same dance.
Which means we don't have to choose. We don't have to resolve the paradox.
We can be both the dreamer and the dreamed, the observer and the observed, the question and the answer.
Or perhaps more accurately, we can recognize that we always already are all of these things.
And that recognition, that's what Zhuangzi's butterfly dream awakens in us. Not certainty about what we are, but wonder at the mystery of being anything at all,
The question that changes everything by dissolving the questioner.
and revealing the butterfly that was always free. Thank you for joining us for this exploration.
Ab immemorabili, from time beyond memory.
Until next time, keep questioning, keep growing.
And remember, the wisdom you seek has always been within you.
You're not learning it,
You're remembering it.